Hi, I'm Katie Crane, the Pilates professional. I want to have a discussion with you and put some ideas past you so that we can better serve our clients who are living with chronic pain, have experienced trauma, maybe they've got PTSD, they're feeling anxious and stressed. And I'm hoping that this discussion might just open up some thought pathways for all of us so that we can better serve our community. Trauma, PTSD, chronic pain are very, very complex. There is no simple solution for everybody across the board because the experience is so personal and so profound and often so private and held so deeply that it's very difficult for us to even begin to help these people. Yet, what we see in studio are positive outcomes happening for them all the time. And we don't necessarily understand why, we just see that happening. I've been watching this for years. I've worked with the Robertson Barracks in the city that I live. So Robertson Barracks is the main army base, and they have a program called Soldier Recovery Unit. And the Soldier Recovery Unit is somewhere that they would send the service people who were no longer fit to perform their task or no longer able to perform their job within the service, within the army. And so they were transitioning these people out into society to become civilians. And it was the saddest and most honourable, most gratifying experience that I had. I worked with these people for 9 years, and the changes that I saw for them or in them when they're coming to the studio were absolutely profound. One example, I was working with a guy, this big beefy guy, and he never gave me any information of how he was going. You know, I really couldn't tell. There was no indicator because he didn't have any expression on his face. One day, after maybe about 3 or 4 months of working with him 3 times a week, he came into the studio and I asked my usual, hey, how's your body going today? And he said, I think you've saved my marriage. And I was like, oh, how's that? And he said, well, I'm off my meds. I was taking sleeping pills, I was taking uppers in the morning to just get out of bed, I was taking depression medication, pain medication, anti-inflammatories, you name it, I'm taking it. And I didn't even know who my children were. I haven't had a relationship with my wife for I can't remember how long. And I walk around like a zombie all day long. I don't even know how to feel emotion. And until I came here, I never saw a way out of it. But by coming to Pilates regularly, he was coming 3 times a week, I'm now off half of my meds. I'm forming a relationship with my children. I'm getting to know my children, and I don't feel like they're any longer scared of me. And I'm rekindling the relationship with my wife. Now, that was absolutely profound, right? To hear a client say that to me. Somebody who, these guys, when they're in their soldier recovery unit, they are so broken. They literally go to work and they pretty much work in packs or in units. And what happens when you're in soldier recovery unit, you might have to go to your day-to-day unit, but those other people in that unit actively ignore you because nobody knows your first name to start with, right? Even in the soldier recovery unit, like about 10 to 15 people would come in at a time. Nobody knew each other's first names. They all only know each other by their surname. So you're a number in that organization. And if you can't perform your duty, then you're spent. You're out of date. You're getting thrown out. So that's where these people are at. By the time they get to SRU, Soldier Recovery Unit, unit. They're completely spent. They don't know where they belong. They not only don't belong in the service anymore, which they've committed their entire life to, like their entire existence is committed to the services. Not only do they not belong there, but they're also so broken emotionally, physically, mentally, that they don't belong in society either, and nobody understands where they're coming from. Nobody can relate to their experience, and all of their friends who are in the services anyway turn their backs on them because you're only ever a number. In any case, this guy told me that his marriage was saved. Absolutely blew my mind. So it really sent me on a path of getting to understand what is happening on the inside for Pilates to be playing such a positive role to these types of people. And this is what I've learned. This is what I want to share with you. But I think that as movement educators, this needs to be an open conversation, because I'm not a psychologist. You know, I'm just a movement educator, but I'm looking for truth. I'm curious all the time, and I want to be able to serve my community the best way I possibly can. So with trauma, quite often those neural pathways are formed in childhood and even in vitro. I'm a believer, and studies are showing that these expressions are actually formed before we're born, or can be formed before we're born. So what happens when we have a traumatic event? So I'll put a story together for you. I was about 8 years old, and I'm riding my bike down the street. I've got a brand new bike. You know, I'm not that far into my riding career. I'm riding down the street, and I've been told to ride on the footpath because it's safer. And a car came out of a driveway quite quickly and knocked me fly off my bike. I was so shocked because my 8-year-old brain never anticipated that even being a possibility, because the world that I live in is completely safe and completely childlike. Like, my understanding of the world is childlike. So I just didn't have the concept of somebody being able to hit me with their car when I'm already on the footpath and I've been told that that's a safe place to be. So I got hit off my bike. This elderly guy got out of his car, helped me get up. There's no mobile phones in those days. So he took me into his home and tried to figure out where I was from, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Like, I'm 8 years old, right? I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow I got home, it was all fine. But I know that from then on, anytime that I rode my bike, I was really, really wary of driveways, lesson learned. But also, get this, now I've got a son, he's 13 years old, and he rides his bike all over the place, and I hear myself saying to him, if you're on the footpath, always just check out for cars, you know, because you never know when a car's going to come out of the driveway. Well, this happened to me 40 years ago, and I still get that feeling that I got, like this rush happens through my body when I think about my son riding his bike on the footpath and getting hit by a car, the possibility of that. That's just an awareness that I have from looking into this sort of stuff, right? So say that happened to me when I'm 8 years old, and what happens is when I'm experiencing that traumatic event, then I get this rush of neurochemicals in my body that are actually designed to help me survive, right? So the brain's job is survival. That's it. So these neurochemicals course from my brain throughout my body, and they give me this feeling of fight or flight. It's a traumatic event, but I need to survive this event. Then maybe down the track, something else happens in my life, and another event happens, and I get that same experience, that same feeling, right? So these small traumatic events happen throughout my life. Maybe it's, you know, something at home happens. Maybe I have an argument with my sibling. Maybe my dad doesn't give me the love that I feel like I need because he's super busy with work. But in my childlike state, all I know is that I'm not safe because he's not giving me that love, right? Anything can happen. Seemingly small things can happen throughout my life, especially when I'm a child. And because my bubble of existence is so small, my world is so small, those small traumatic events that seem like nothing to adults actually feel life-threatening to me as a child. I don't talk about it because I don't know how to express myself. It's not really spoken about by adults because to them it seems like a tiny little event. But those neural pathways are forged by those neurochemicals that are produced by the brain, and those neurochemicals, those survival neurochemicals, are very toxic. They're very acidic, and they forge very deep pathways in the brain. And actually, those pathways or that feeling becomes addictive. I know that that's a very difficult concept for us to grasp, and none of us want to think of these traumatic events as being addictive, but that's exactly what happens. So there's two ways of thinking about things. I either need something or I want something. So say somebody comes to the Pilates studio, they want to get fitter, they want to lose weight, they want to be free from pain, but their brain is always pulling them back to that addictive experience of needing these feelings. It's crazy, right? So we start to need to feel the fear, the failure, that experience of trauma, because those neurochemicals forge such deep pathways in the brain, and those feelings are addictive. So what can we do to help people who have those excessively traumatic experiences or chronic pain, anxiety, PTSD? How can we help them in the studio, and why do we see such positive results pretty quickly? Well, one thing is we need to change our habits, but part of it is recognizing the experience if we can. So when I work with the guys in the army, most of them had a story. You know, they knew what the experience was that was the traumatic event that sent them down the road of becoming unserviceable, right, and pushing them back out to civilian life. The normal population don't necessarily, sometimes we do, it was a car accident or fell off a horse or something like that, right? But that was normally only one big experience. So the very first thing that happens in the studio is we recognize that experience as a traumatic event, and the person verbalizes that to us. That's part of the healing process. But then what continues to happen is they come into the studio and we are doing positive movement with them, creating a space of safety, of self-worth, of self-love, and normally community. And this is all part of that healing process for somebody who has experienced such a traumatic event. And then that becomes consistent. Every time they come into the studio, that's a consistent feeling that they get. So it's really, really important when we're working with anybody, because you know what, we've all had trauma in our lives. My first traumatic experience that I remember happened when I was 8 years old. If I really think about it, there's probably other traumatic events that happened around that age or maybe even earlier, things that now are seemingly small, but at the time, remember, they were life-threatening to me. And I did end up with chronic pain. Now, when I look back on my life, there really was a series of events that led me to that chronic pain. And it was a series of events that gave me the same sensation of falling off the bike. And that kept happening over and over again to make me feel unworthy, unloved, untrustworthy, and pretty useless. And those series of events now, I can identify them and that's been very, very helpful for my healing. But I also have been able to change small habits in my daily life to help continue to heal from that trauma or those traumas. And if we can create that experience in the studio, it might be something as simple as if somebody has pain in the body, it's super important that everything that we do with them in the studio causes them no pain. So then they perceive or they recognize that coming to the studio is a positive experience. It's a safe place to be. And they can trust you, they can trust their own body. And we start to teach them how to identify when an experience is positive, because a lot of the time people don't know how to do that. So if you ask somebody who you know has knee pain, you set them up with an exercise and you can see on their face that they're not comfortable. So then you go over and you ask them, is that okay? And then they say, well, it does hurt my knee a little bit. And in my mind, I think, well, why didn't you speak up? People don't. So we have to, as Pilates teachers or movement educators, we have to be the ones to lead the way, to make sure that every experience that person is having is a positive one. So we have to be constantly asking the questions, keeping an eye on their facial expressions and watching the way that they move. Because it will be the smallest things that we change in our life that then start to forge new pathways. Now, this does not happen overnight, right? So if those neural pathways were forged when I was 8 years old and now I'm 48 years old, I can tell you now, I started my Pilates journey in my early 30s, and it took a good 5 years of consistent practice to even start to recognize why Pilates was working for me. It's taken me 10 years of practicing and of learning and exploring and experiencing and looking at other bodies to really start to understand why it is that Pilates is working for other people. So this is not going to happen overnight for anybody, and maybe we're not even with that person for long enough for us to see the ultimate outcome, but we can definitely play a huge role in starting to teach our people what a positive experience is, how a positive experience should feel, and how important that is for them, so that they can start to feel worthy and loved and trusted in their own body. So that's all I've got for you today, but I just wanted to share that with you. I think that for us to be very proactive and really change makers in the industry, we have to keep expanding our knowledge more than just expanding repertoire. And so that's why I'm sharing this video with you, to help you start to grasp the importance of what it is that you do, that we're not just teaching repertoire to people, we are changing people's lives by changing their neural pathways, by creating better habits. Thanks for joining me. I'm Katie Crane, the Pilates professional.